Our reading from the Hebrew Scriptures this morning is taken from the book of Genesis, Genesis chapter 32 and beginning at verse 22. This is a strange and a familiar story. I would invite you to listen closely to this story of Jacob wrestling in the night. The same night, Jacob got up and took his 2 wives, that's biblical marriage, his 2 maids, and his 11 children, and crossed the fords of the Jabbok. He took them and sent them across the stream, and likewise everything that he had. And Jacob was left alone. And a man wrestled with him until daybreak. When the man saw that he did not prevail against Jacob, he struck him on the hip socket. And Jacob's hip was put out of joint as he wrestled with him. Then the man said, "Let me go, for the day is breaking." But Jacob said, "I will not let you go unless you bless me." So he said to him, "What is your name?" And he said, "Jacob." And the man said, "You shall no longer be called Jacob, but Israel," which means strives with God. But Israel, for you have striven with God and with humans and have prevailed. Then Jacob asked him, "Please tell me your name." But he said, "Why is it that you ask my name?" And there he blessed him. So Jacob called that place Peniel, which means face of God. For he said, "I have seen God face to face, and yet my life is preserved." The sun rose upon him as he passed Peniel, limping because of his hip. May God bless to our understanding this reading from God's holy word, and to God's name be glory and praise. Amen. Just when you thought it was safe to get back in the water, the shallow waters of the river Jabbok here at the crossing. You know, water crossings are always significant in the Bible. Have you noticed that? And rivers tend to be significant. Just who is Jacob wrestling with, though? And if he's wrestling with God, why is God such a wimp? Because it says elsewhere, it's implied that in Genesis that Jacob was no tough guy. He was a quiet man living in tents, and he liked to cook. Not that that's a bad thing. He just wasn't a rugged person. Who's he wrestling with? Is it an angel? Is it God? Is it his own conscience? Is it his inner demon? How's this for an idea? Do you remember earlier in Genesis how it says that Jacob and his twin Esau struggled in the womb? And we know that on this night he's going to meet Esau, whom he has not seen since he swindled the guy out of his inheritance. Maybe it's got something to do with that womb wrestling. I don't know. He must be more than a little scared. Little does Jacob know that his big, simple, sweet-tempered brother Esau, whom he hasn't seen since the day he swindled him, is not the dark, brooding, grudge-holding type like he is. He's the forgiving type. But Jacob knows that if Esau is still angry with him, Esau can snap him like a twig. It's hard for a complicated person like Jacob to understand a simple person like Esau. Not that simple means dumb. It doesn't mean dumb. It means unambiguous. It's hard for a complicated person to understand a simple person, maybe harder than for a simple person to understand a complicated one. And maybe we do spend our whole lives reliving the struggles of the womb. I don't know. This story is hard to interpret and rich with possibilities. One thing we will discover at the night crossing of the river Jabbok is that there is always meaning and blessing hidden in the dark and in the struggle. There's always meaning and blessing hidden in the strange uncertainty of our own night crossings. I mean, you've spent a night or two wrestling, haven't you? Because maybe the wrestling in the text is not literal wrestling anyway. You've spent a night or two wrestling with what? An angel? A demon? God? A fear? A doubt? Your own conscience? Your own divided heart? Why is it that these things wait until after dark to really attack us? Why is it that they make their fiercest attack at night? When we're vulnerable and in need of rest, that's when they want to come and pick a fight. Many a time, well, things just feel different at night. Everything feels different at night. Many a time I have backpacked into some beautiful spot in the woods and decided this is home for the night, only to discover that as the sun went down, it wasn't beautiful anymore. It was kind of sinister. The babbling brook that sounded like laughter now sounds like somebody out there whispering, or evil laughter. That's when you take a melatonin and you just try to get a few hours of sleep until the sun comes up. Or a pleasant, familiar room like this one that's usually filled with light, sunlight, bright, clear light. Have you ever been in here in the dark? Not Christmas Eve dark, I mean the real dark. When you were working with Family Promise back in the day, or maybe just locking up after an evening event, it's a whole different place. It's not spooky exactly, but it's strange. I've never felt afraid here, but it has a somber feel, and you just want to get out. You want to get to your car. Things are spookier at night, and our minds are less clear, somehow. The thoughts and the deeds and the feelings of the day, they all need to be put to rest. They've been weighing on us. And in the dark, our brains and our bodies, they just want sleep. And it causes us to lose our sharpness, our daytime sharpness. We're clouded. Perceptions cannot be trusted. A towel thrown over a chair on the other side of the room might start to look like a face in the dark. The face of someone you used to know. Some sound in a distant part of the house. What is it? Did the cat knock something over, or is somebody trying to get in the basement window? Your nighttime thoughts might just stray into the realm of the unexplained. Not that the night makes you believe in ghosts, of course. But you remember that song back in the 80s, Crazy in the Night by Kim Carnes? There's a monster on the ceiling, there's a monster on the wall. Nighttime thoughts can be different from daytime thoughts. Horror movies that you saw long ago might sneak back and visit you. That remake of The Exorcist looks truly harrowing. And did the government really find aliens? I mean, real bona fide aliens 2 weeks ago? And why is North Korea testing nuclear weapons? And what's going to happen in the Ukraine? And will this haze ever go away? And why can't I get to sleep? And it says on the bottle not to take more than 2 melatonins. What happens if you take too much melatonin? Should I just let my hair grow back? These are nighttime thoughts. It's when fevers spike and reason takes a backseat to imagination. And add to that a world before electricity, when you couldn't just switch on the light and read a book. The best you could do was kindle a fire without matches and light a torch. In an age when people believed that in the darkness there were devils and spirits, and the best you could do was put a locked door between yourself and the night. Say your prayers before you put out your fire, and you remember that grisly old prayer they used to say with us, don't you? If I should die before I wake, I pray the Lord my soul to take. Jacob the deceiver is alone in the night. Now let's talk about Jacob, because Jacob is a piece of work. Jacob. You recall that Jacob and Esau were twins, as different as, well, night and day. And of the two, Jacob would be night. He's a deceiver. He tricks people. He broods. He schemes. And he's got a lot on his conscience there at the fords of the river Jabbok. Jacob liked to cook. Esau, his brother, his twin, liked to hunt. They're twins, but Esau was born first, and so according to that old-fashioned system called primogeniture, the oldest son gets everything, and everybody else has to fend for themselves. And so Esau was going to be the inheritor. He was his father's favorite anyway. And the covenant that God made with Abraham would be given to Esau, and he will be the patriarch of Israel. But Jacob and his mother, he's his mother's favorite, they hatch a plan to trick poor blind old Isaac into blessing the wrong kid so that Jacob will get to be the father of Israel, and Esau will be on his own. And after playing that trick, Jacob flees into the night, and he hasn't seen anybody in his family for years because he knows that if Esau ever caught hold of him, he'd smash him like an egg. Fast forward to the crossing of the river Jabbok. The brothers haven't seen each other in decades, and Jacob has suffered for his sins. He's had a hard life. And Esau sends for Jacob at last and says, "Brother, come back." And Jacob, with a lot of fear and trepidation, goes back to his brother, and he's going to meet him tomorrow, and he doesn't know what Esau has in mind. If he's still angry, if he still wants revenge. And in the dark and the solitude of that night, before their uncertain reunion, Jacob is alone with his thoughts on the banks of the river Jabbok, and he wrestles. Does he wrestle with his hands or with his mind? I don't know. This is where things get weird. It's night. Jacob is filled with the dread of the nighttime, but also with the dread of tomorrow, not knowing what Esau has in mind. Jacob wrestles with what? With an angel? With a demon? With God? His own conscience condemning him for what he did to Esau all those years ago? In the end, just before sunrise, Jacob pins his opponent and refuses to let him go until his opponent blesses him. And his opponent both wounds him and blesses him, renaming him Israel, which means strives with God. Great name. And he will, for the rest of his life, walk with a limp, as we do if we've really spent a night wrestling with our own inner stuff. The sun rises, Jacob limps off to meet Esau. Esau is so happy to see Jacob. He runs to him and hugs him, and all is forgotten. He probably didn't want the job anyway of being the father of Israel. There's so much to unpack here, far too much for a communion Sunday. But this is what I want to highlight. Think how Jacob finally got his blessing the hard way, the honest way. The blessing that he tried to steal from his father is at last granted to him through honest struggle and through confronting his own guilt and his own faults, through confronting his demon or his God or his conscience in the night. Scholars say that this story is pre-Israelite, that it's based on ancient myths about local gods that protected river crossings and forests and things like that. Those local gods were called Numans, as in, hello, Newman. They were called Numans. Who knows? And their power evaporated with the morning light. And it's interesting how the person he wrestles with says that. The sun's coming up, let me go. But for me, it matters a lot who he's wrestling with here. And the text implies that it's God, but perhaps God through his own conscience. For I believe that he was indeed striving with his own guilt about what he did to Esau and what this reunion is going to look like and if he's going to be punished at last again. He had to own his sin, accept it, and receive its harm, live with its pain in order to be blessed for the days and the duties ahead of him. And he walked forever after with a limp, after that dark and dreadful night. But at last he walked with a head held high, for he had faced his demon or his God. He was no longer a thief, but a chastised, repentant soul who had earned the right to be called Israel. And you? Perhaps you find yourself at a night crossing on your journey in life. You who sit in your pew or in your home, reflecting on this familiar tale from Genesis, you with your own darkness and your own uncertain tomorrows and your own tangled relationships, you with your own bundle of anxieties, sins, you with your own wrestling. If your conscience were to come to you in the form of a person and struggle with you in the night, if your fears were to accost you in the dark, could you face them and demand from them their painful blessing? There is meaning and there is blessing hidden in the strange uncertainty and in the struggle. of our night crossings. Sometimes love will fight you to be found. Healing and growth and recovery, these things might just accost you, and they might demand to be dealt with, demand a place in your life. They might insist that you face them. There are moments in our private lives when our past will reach out and smack us, commanding a response, maybe even a struggle. And the strange thing is that when that happens, your opponent wants you to win. They're trying to help you here. Your opponent wants you to win. It'll pick a fight with you just so that you have to deal with the issue, just so that it can offer you its painful blessing. The one you wrestle with is God, who helps you to get past the place where you're stuck in order to bless you with new beginnings on the other side of the river. But God knows that you can't cross the river Jabbok without getting your feet wet. Confession. It's good for the soul. Coming clean. It hurts, but then it heals. Owning our national and personal sins, it's freeing. Redemption comes from facing the hard stuff, wrestling with it in the dark, at the edge of transition. This heals the world, and it restores relationships. In many ways, doesn't our nation stand on the banks of the river Jabbok? In Oklahoma, it's illegal to teach certain things about the history of slavery and Jim Crow and the civil rights movement. The folks in power decided that teaching those things would just incite bitterness in people and that it would be unpatriotic. A teacher can lose their license in Oklahoma for teaching too much about slavery or Jim Crow or civil rights in a state where teachers only make about $25,000. A black woman I know in Oklahoma City published something on Facebook that gave me chills. It was a picture of a poster for a slave auction in 1845. And she wrote above it, "This is what they don't want us to know." And the poster said, "Negroes for sale, prime and healthy." And it described them in various paragraphs on the poster. The worst paragraph to me was the one that said, "6 girls, comely, quiet, budding out." I think that means coming into puberty, which is a really creepy thing to put on a sales poster. Not headstrong, manageable. You could weep to think of little girls being sold away from their families. I don't want to think about this stuff either. I don't want to talk about this stuff either. Nobody wants to think about this stuff or talk about it. And how creepy is it for the slavers to say on their poster that these girls are reaching puberty? I understand the desire to put this under the carpet and forget it and hope that there will come a day when we've all just kind of forgotten. But can we heal if we do that? Can we heal as a nation if we just try to forget? Can you ever fully forgive someone who will not acknowledge the harm? Now, you and I, of course, did not sell or buy slaves, but we've inherited a system where all of that happened, and a system that has benefited us in a lot of ways. Can you ever fully forgive someone who won't acknowledge their part in your pain? Maybe, but it's a lot harder. It's a lot harder. Admitting that America does not have a spotless record is noble. It's brave. It's healing. It's not unpatriotic to name our national sins. Working for the healing of relationships within the nation is about the most patriotic thing you could do for your country. Not only is it good for the offended party, as in the case of Jacob, it's good for the guilty party too. Historic sins, both public and private, will haunt us until we confront them in the night. How powerful it is to own your faults. It's a healing balm to yourself and to anyone you may have harmed. How redemptive it is to face your fears, to meet them in the dark, to grapple with them, and in the grappling to receive their painful blessing because they have one and they will bestow it. How restorative to name the thing that scares you and pull it out into the light and deal with it, confront it. It is a night crossing in our world in these times, with uncertainties and anxieties about tomorrow, and a lot of relationships that look like they might be past fixing. It is a night crossing for many institutions that we love, and certainly for our country and for the nations of the earth. It's a night crossing for many that we know and love. And we don't do our clearest, best, most logical thinking at night. Jacob was only ready to live into his tomorrow after he'd struggled to make peace with his yesterday. Whatever your night crossing, approach it with courage. Do not flee from its challenge and its struggle. It's probably going to hurt, but haven't you noticed that the good things always do? Yes, embrace the struggle of the night crossing and do not let it go until it blesses you, for bless you it will. This is one of the rules of the dark and of the night. There is always meaning and blessing hidden in the dark. Amen.